Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. In the United States, thousands of protesters flood cities in all 50 states. Citizens rally against President Trump and his actions in the biggest nationwide outcry since his second term began. Donald Trump urges Americans to hang tough as newly imposed tariffs begin to shake global markets. The European Union is expected to join China and Canada and present a united front in the coming days with countermeasures worth up to $28 billion. Israel's army admits its soldiers made errors in the killings of 15 emergency workers in southern Gaza in March. A video shows a convoy of emergency vehicles and a UN car coming under fire near Rafah. At least 3 people are injured and multiple fires erupt after a Russian missile hits the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. In a separate air attack in southern Ukraine also leaves 3 more people injured. Palestinian group Hamas releases a video of 2 Israeli hostages alive and held in Gaza as Israel continues its strikes. This comes as French President Emmanuel Macron plans a summit with Egyptian and Jordanian leaders to discuss the Gaza conflict. Rains fall on parts of earthquake-stricken Myanmar, complicating relief efforts and raising the risk of disease across the region. This comes as the death toll from the disaster nears 3,500. Media aligned with Yemen's Houthi rebels says 1 person is killed and several others are injured in airstrikes on the country's north. The rebels have accused the United States of carrying out the attacks. Iran's foreign minister says direct negotiations with the United States are meaningless after President Trump expresses a preference for talks with the Islamic Republic. Our top story today, as stated by the Houthi officials, at least 2 people have been killed in US airstrikes in Yemen's Houthi-controlled Saada province overnight. A video posted by President Donald Trump suggests a much higher toll, however. The Houthis claim the strike hit a solar power shop, while the US officials remain silent on specifics. Trump's shared drone footage showed a devastating blast wiping out a group he claimed where Houthi groups were planning an attack. This was followed by US Central Command releasing another video of fighter jets taking off from a US carrier. Yemen's rebel-run Saada news agency said the strike actually targeted an Eid al-Fitr gathering in Hodeida, killing and wounding dozens, including a Houthi police colonel. This comes as the Trump administration ramps up its campaign on Yemen, conducting over 200 strikes since mid-March in response to the Houthis' attacks on international shipping. Analysts say the US strategy has shifted, now targeting Houthi command networks and infrastructure. The Houthis have launched over 100 attacks on ships since late 2023, sinking 2 vessels and killing 4 sailors. The strikes mark a significant escalation in the region and appear tied to wider efforts by Washington to pressure Iran over its nuclear program. Staying in the Middle East now, in a sharp rebuke to Washington, Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi has dismissed the idea of direct negotiations with the United States, calling them meaningless. His comments come just days after US President Donald Trump says he prefers direct talks over intermediaries when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. Araghchi said meaningful diplomacy cannot happen while the US continues to issue military threats and sends mixed signals through conflicting statements by its officials. He reaffirmed Iran's openness to indirect talks, but warned Tehran is fully prepared to defend its sovereignty if provoked. Meanwhile, the Iranian president echoed a similar sentiment, saying Iran is ready for dialogue, but only on equal footing. Tensions have been mounting after President Trump warned of bombings and secondary tariffs if Iran refuses to reach a nuclear deal with Washington. We are joined by Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe from the Koltalawala Defence University located in Colombo. Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Punsara, why do you think that this Iranian foreign minister considers direct negotiations with the United States meaningless? Is it because of who is sat in the Oval Office right now?
I think it is mainly due to the real political structure that the Tehran is facing under the grip of Donald Trump. So you must look at the history of the Iranian-US relations for past couple of decades. When Obama was in power in 2015, they made a joint proclamation, a joint dialogue consisting of the United States and several European countries, which lifted up certain sanctions imposed by United States on Iran by paving the path for more lenient dialogues in the long run. But when President Trump came to power in 2016, right within 2 years, the US withdrew from the action plan. So Iran was devastated, and the Tehran regime lost its trust in the liberal international legal order, especially. And also, you must not forget the trajectories which set the path under President Trump that further undermine the relations between Washington and the Tehran. We can't forget the way how General Soleimani was assassinated in year 2020, the 2nd of January, right after the assassination, and President Trump tweeted targeting that the Washington will destroy even the cultural properties, right? Even the cultural symbolic values in Iran. I mean, come on, that's a blatant violation of international law. So this is the perception that Iranian perceives towards Donald Trump, who is sitting at the Oval Office right now. So it is in this context that we need to understand and we need to assess the relationship between Tehran and the United States. And I'm not surprised by the fact that the Iranian diplomat, the foreign minister's rejection over the President Trump's the direct deal with Iran, saying that, ignoring it as a fallacy or as a meaningless one. Because why? Because there is no equal footing in the real politics.
Yes, Dr. Amarasinghe, Donald Trump has been very vocal on his threats of bombing and secondary tariffs. How do you see these threats influencing Iran's decision-making process, both in the short term and in the long term?
I mean, come on, that no one is privy to that. Even countries such as located in South Asia, even my country. So we are being imposed approximately 47% of the tariff, right? So, I mean, I'm clearly aware of the real geopolitical and economic implications emanating from the tariff order. I'm sure that Iran, as a country which has a significant percentage of the world oil market, is likely to suffer under this tariff. It will add one more brick to the economic collapse of Tehran. So if you just go through the statistics from the Middle East, if you just go through what is exactly happening in Iran after the death of Raisi last year, right, the Iranian, the former president, the country is on a brink of a total economic eclipse. Besides the sanctions imposed by EU and the United States of America, the economic regime is not functioning well. So this is something that you cannot ignore these factors, and this tariff issue will definitely undermine and it will escalate Iran's the economic devastations further in the days to come.
Yes. One final question. Do you believe there is a realistic path to a revised agreement here between Washington and Tehran?
Yes, I think if it needs to be a realistic term, if it needs to be more realistic, there must be a consensus between Tehran and the Washington, so which we can't foresee it in near future, because both parties are not trusting each other, regardless of President Trump's rhetoric saying that he is willing to deal directly with Iran. I mean, basically, it was during Donald Trump's period that the United States withdrew from the joint declaration by undermining the nuclear, like the joint declaration inaugurated by Obama. So in order to maintain more realistic terms, there must be equal footings between United States and Iran. So that has to be accomplished before reaching any further agreements.
Yes.
And also don't forget that Iran is I would say, it's a spiritual country. It's a theocratic state, wherein besides the president and the advisors around the president, you have Khamenei as the spiritual leader. And Khamenei, only for the Khamenei, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard would be responsible, right? Iranian Revolutionary Guard carries the
Dr.
fundamental...
Pansara Amara Singh, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We now move on to more news updates. Now to Europe, where a missile attack on the Ukrainian capital of Kiev has injured at least 4 people and caused several blazes, according to the city's mayor Vitaly Klitschko. 2 days after a Russian strike killed 18 people in President Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said paramedics had been sent to 2 districts in Kiev, while the Ukrainian Air Force said missiles had entered the northern Checheniv region. According to reports, 4 people have been injured so far, while fires broke out in non-residential areas and 8 cars were damaged. Here's what residents had to say.
Что у тебя там горит, и заходи, ховайся там подальше. Все, я даже не понимаю, що то эти дрони ті, чи що воно там літає. Щось гуде та й гуде. Що воно там залетіло, що розбило там шифер, і тут вилетіло до сусідів. Ну і що, шибки повилітали там раз.
In the aftermath, a huge crater was seen in an office building in the Ukrainian capital, with debris scattered around and smoke rising in the distance. All of Ukraine was under air alerts after the country's air force warned of an attack, including on regions bordering Poland, forcing the NATO member to scramble aircraft to ensure air safety. Poland's military said it and allied forces had taken to the skies in response to Russian strikes across the border in western Ukraine, with ground-based air defense systems on high alert. The attacks come as US President Donald Trump pushes for a partial ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. On Saturday, Zelensky slammed the US embassy for what he called a weak statement that did not blame Russia for the deadly missile strike on his home city of Kyiv. The Ukrainian president took aim at the US ambassador Bridget Brink after she posted a message on X on Friday saying she was horrified that tonight a ballistic missile struck near a playground and restaurant. In an emotional statement on social media, Zelensky had named each of the 9 children killed in the attack and accused the US embassy of avoiding referring to Russia as the aggressor. The Ukrainian president did, however, show his gratefulness to every country whose representatives spoke out following the Russian missile strike on his hometown. Let's take a look at what he said.
І сьогодні багато хто у світі заявив про свою позицію після цього удару, позицію чіткого несприйняття російського терору. Всім, хто це бачить і не заплющує очі, а говорить чітко і ясно правду, не тільки ми в Україні, а весь світ має бути вдячним. Замовчувати те, що це саме Росія вбиває дітей балістикою, це неправильно, це небезпечно, це тільки підбурює покидьків в Москві. Продовжувати війну та надалі ігнорувати дипломатію. Слабкість ще ніколи не закінчувала війни. Тому я вдячний кожній країні, чиї представники висловились. Лідери, міністри закордонних справ, посольства.
The president also met British and French military chiefs in Kiev on Friday to discuss a plan to send a reassurance force to Ukraine if and when a deal on ending the conflict is reached. Zelensky wrote on social media that the meeting, when the British Chief of Defence Staff Tony Radakin and his French counterpart Thierry Burkhard agreed the first details on how the security contingent of partners can be deployed. We are joined by Glenn Grant, ex-advisor of Defence Minister of Ukraine, located in Riga, Latvia, to discuss this further. Glenn, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure. Obviously, it's been a a tough couple of days in Ukraine, especially with the Russian strikes that killed 19 yesterday, including 9 children in Zelensky's hometown. Can you give the immediate impact of this Russian missile strike on both military and civilian morale in the country of Ukraine right now?
Yeah, and I'm actually in Kiev this week. So I was under the attack last night, and in fact one of the missiles was actually killed right above my the place I'm staying. So set off all the car alarms, and the noise was and the vibration was pretty significant. And that, I think that the actual missile probably came down on one of those areas that you were talking about. The mood here is one of stubbornness, frustration with the American, and you saw what with the Americans, and you saw what Zelensky had actually said. But you know the people are actually taking it with a degree, in English we'd say a pinch of salt to the whole thing, and you know some of the things that were written this morning are now calling them missiles of peace, because this is how they view the word peace and Russians' aggression and attacks. I mean, everybody is really sad about what happened in, as you say, in Zelensky's hometown, and the flags here are all at half-mast because of that, and it's indicative of everything. But stubbornness and a desire not to give in to Russia still remain the primary drivers in this part of the world.
Glenn, Ukraine obviously is needing strong statements of support, but Western leaders are also pushing for peace negotiations, especially obviously one Donald Trump of the United States. What challenges do you see in balancing calls for immediate condemnation of Russia with the desire for a ceasefire or peace deal?
Well, I don't see any. I think the thing that people have to understand is that, especially Indians, is that they must look at not what people say, but what is actually happening. Russia is showing no signs whatsoever of going for a peace deal. This is not some great push so that they're in advantage and then suddenly they're going to give in to US. They're not. Everything they are doing is setting themselves up for a long-term attack and fight on Ukraine, and the idea of a peace deal is actually a distraction, and it's a distraction when you see people like 2 chiefs of defense from France and Britain going to Ukraine and talking about what we will do when there's a peace deal. That is a total distraction. It taking people's minds and eyes away from the real problem, which is facing up to Russia. Distraction means Russia will keep moving forward because there will be no peace deal suddenly in a hurry. I'm pretty sure of that. So I don't think there's a problem with this. It's just that people have got to come to the realization of the reality of what is happening, not the hope, because hope is not a military principle. It's not even a political diplomatic principle. It's stupidity in this case. Russia attacks, Russia kills, Russia keeps going. As long as we keep that in mind, then everything else has got to be based upon that.
Glenn Grant, thank you very much for joining us. Very glad you are safe. We now have to move on. We now move on to our coverage regarding Trump's tariffs. Tens of thousands participated in demonstrations across the United States in what appeared to be the largest protest since Donald Trump returned to the White House. Under the banner "Hands Off," protesters took place in over 1,000 cities, expressing opposition to the administration's policies on abortion, immigration, trade and civil liberties. In Washington, an estimated 20,000 people gathered on the National Mall, where speakers, including Representatives Jamie Raskin, criticised what they described as authoritarian tactics. Similar sentiments were voiced in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, and other major cities, with some protesters using terms such as fascist and lunatics to characterize the president's approach. Demonstrations were also held in European locations, including London and Berlin, reflecting broader global attention. The movement was supported by organisations such as Move On and Women's March, which it described as a response to what they see as threats to democracy and human rights. A common slogan repeated throughout the protests was "Hands off our freedoms, hands off our future." Here's what some of the protesters in different parts of America had to say.
See the number of people here because of all of the things that the Trump administration is doing, that an unelected official like Elon Musk is doing, mad about the things that are being taken away from the middle class of America and given to the very wealthy, and wanted to be here with my daughter, who I wanted to show her that you can stand up for what is right, and even when you're in Texas, you can support the things that are right, even if there's an awful lot of red around.
The lack of empathy in this country is depressing, truly. I mean, I feel horrible. Immigrants are getting deported. The president's so worried about 0.1% of the population, transgender people, but he doesn't care about the economy, he doesn't talk about lowering prices, inflation. He just says, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. So I came out here because I felt like I had.
So we have about 100 people who have come down by bus and van from New Hampshire to protest against this outrageous administration who is causing us to lose our allies across the world and causing devastation to people here at home that have needs. They're gutting our government, gutting our services, gutting our institutions, and really ripping apart the fabric of America that we stand on as a great nation.
A sweeping 10% baseline tariff on all imports took effect in the US, triggering market chaos and diplomatic alarm around the world. President Donald Trump defended the move, calling it part of an economic revolution and urging Americans to hang tough through the turmoil. The announcement sent US stocks into tailspin, with S&P plunging nearly 6%, making its worst week since 2020. Furthermore, China announced swift retaliatory tariffs, while the UK and French leaders warned nothing is off the table. On the other hand, European Union countries will seek to present a united front in the coming days against US President Donald Trump's tariffs. They are likely to approve a first set of targeted countermeasures on up to $28 billion of US imports, from dental floss to diamonds. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said Britain would accelerate plans for industrial support and potentially state intervention to protect UK businesses, which now faces 25% tariffs on cars, steel and aluminium exports. Tesla CEO Elon Musk, now heading the Department of Government Efficiency, suggested the turmoil might lead to a zero tariff-free trade zone between Europe and North America. Let's take a listen to what Elon Musk had to say.
Well, I hope that I hope that the United States and Europe can establish a very close partnership. We obviously are, there's an alliance already, but I'm hopeful that there can be a very close relationship with America and Europe. And I'm hopeful, for example, with the tariffs, that at the end of the day, I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. That would be that's what I hope occurs. And also more freedom of people to move between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view. So that has certainly been my advice to the president.
Meanwhile, Vietnamese and American business groups pleaded for a delay in the looming 46% tariff on Vietnamese goods, all while Zimbabwe, despite being hit with an 18% US tariff, surprised analysts by suspending all duties on US imports to promote bilateral trade. We now move to the Middle East. A powerful video has surfaced showing the final moments of 15 emergency workers killed by Israeli troops in southern Gaza on March the 23rd. The footage was recovered from a slain paramedic's phone and shows a marked convoy of ambulances with flashing lights approaching the site near Rafah before being hit by gunfire. Let's have a look at this video.
يا رب يكونوا بخير يا رب يكونوا بخير هي مرمين 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 بسرعة بسرعة هذا الشيء.
The Palestine Red Crescent Society says the workers were unarmed and responding to a call for help. Israel initially claimed the vehicles were moving suspiciously in darkness without any lights, but the IDF has now admitted that the account was inaccurate and says soldiers mistook the convoy for a threat after an earlier strike on Hamas operatives. The military acknowledges mistakes were made and says an internal investigation is underway. International groups are demanding an independent probe. The UN confirms one of its workers was among the dead. Calls for accountability are growing amid ongoing Israeli strikes in Gaza. Here's what the Red Crescent Society has said.
مركبات الإسعاف تحمل الشارة المحمية دوليا رغم أن مركبات الإسعاف كانت تضيء أيضا مصابيح الإنارة. تعمد جنود الاحتلال إطلاق النار بشكل هستيري على فريق الإسعاف الذي كان يرتدي أيضا زي الهلال الأحمر ما أدى إلى استشهاد.
A diplomatic row is now unfolding after two British members of parliament were detained and deported by Israeli authorities. Labour MP Yuan Yang and Abid Sam Mohammed had flown to Israel as part of a parliamentary delegation but were blocked from entering the country. Both the parliamentarians have also released a joint statement. Israel's Interior Ministry claims the MPs were intending to spread what it called hateful rhetoric against the state and its people. The move has drawn sharp condemnation from British Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who called the detentions unacceptable, counterproductive and deeply concerning. Lammy says he has raised the issue directly with Israeli officials and is offering support to both lawmakers. This is what the UK Chief Secretary to the Treasury stated.
From all parties will often go around the world to see things that we are investing in, whether it's an aid, for example, which I suspect is what this visit was about, or to engage with parliamentarians in other countries, and you expect to be able to go about that business without interruption, which is why the way that my colleagues have been treated is unacceptable.
Over to the Indo-Pacific now, where South Korea's political future could be in for a major shake-up. The Speaker of the National Assembly is calling for a constitutional revision to curb presidential powers just days after President Yoon Suk-yeol was ousted for declaring martial law. At a press conference, Speaker Woo Won-shik said public support for reform is now stronger than ever. He proposed a national referendum on constitutional change to take place alongside the upcoming presidential election, which must be held within 60 days. Speaker Woo warned that the imperial presidency remains a source of deep political division despite the court's decision. A Gallup Korea poll last month found 54% of respondents in favour of reforming the current presidential system. The Election Commission is eyeing June 3rd as a possible date for the vote. South Korea's constitution was last amended in 1987 to introduce direct presidential elections and a single 5-year term. There's now renewed momentum across party lines to revise that system. Leading opposition figure Lee Jae-myung and candidates within Yoon's own People Power Party are voicing support for changes such as limiting presidents to 2 4-year terms. Let's listen to what Woo Won-shik had to say.
저는 오늘 국민 여러분께 이제 신속하게 개헌을 추진하자는 제안을 하고자 합니다. 위헌 불법 비상계엄과 탄핵 정국을 거치면서 그 어느 때보다 개헌의 시급성에 대한 국민적 공감대가 큽니다.
2 people have died after a decorative structure collapse at the Axe Ceremonia Music Festival in Mexico City. The structure was being moved when a crane fell on the victims, who died later in the hospital. Local authorities say the cranes were not included in the original event plan approved by officials. As a result, the Miguel Hidalgo district has ordered a suspension of the 2-day festival until investigations are completed. The festival had drawn thousands of attendees, with artists like Massive Attack and FKA Twigs set to perform. Organisers have pledged to contact the victims' families and offer support. We move to sports news now, where Red Bull's Max Verstappen claimed his first win of the season with a calm and commanding drive at the Japanese Grand Prix, fending off constant pressure from McLaren's Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The trio ran nose to tail for much of the race, with strategy and pit stops offering the only chance for a change. Verstappen defended firmly during a tense pit exit moment, with Norris a move cleared by stewards. Piastri showed strong pace and hinted at challenging for the lead, but McLaren held formation. Further back, Ferrari's Charles Leclerc edged George Russell for 4th, while 18-year-old Andrea Kimi Antonelli made history by briefly leading and setting the fastest lap, both youngest ever records in F1. Lewis Hamilton finished 7th in a gritty drive, with Alex Albon and Oliver Bearman rounding out the top 10. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.